Back with another second thought video. You know what I'm saying, bro? Recommended this. This the U.S. doesn't meddle in foreign affairs. You feel me? We gonna get straight to it. I don't know what foreign affairs is. I'm gonna keep it a bean. I should have looked it up before I even did this. I ain't gonna lie, but at the same time, I'm just like, bro, I like informational shit as long as it's gonna mean something to me later in life. You feel me? That's why I don't even care about school. You teaching me about shit that don't mean nothing. Teaching a nigga about credit or something. You know what I'm saying? I don't. You ain't teach me about credit or nothing. You know what I'm saying? But we gonna get straight to this.
Let's get this straight. How would it be if the United States were viewed by the rest of the
They
world
be wanting you to feel.
as interfering with the elections directly of other countries, and everybody knew it? What would it be like if we engaged in activities that he is engaged in? It diminishes the standing of a country that is desperately trying to make sure it maintains its standing as a major world power.
That's part of what makes us special as Americans. Unlike the old empires, we don't make these sacrifices for territory or for resources.
Hold on. I'm gonna not be ignorant, and I'm gonna look up what foreign affairs mean. Foreign affairs. I don't know if that's how you spell it, but fuck it. Yeah. What was that? Is the leading magazine in foreign death medicines. Wait, what? Foreign is an American magazine of international relations and U.S. foreign policy published by the Council of Foreign Relations. But what does it do though? Fuck it, bro. It's just a group of people. How about that? How about that, man? It's a group of people. A group of nations.
We do it
Group
because
of,
it's right.
I don't know. Shit.
It's funny. The countries which have spent the greatest amount of time enslaving, invading, overthrowing, and exploiting the rest of the world are for some reason seen as the torchbearers of civilization today. While many powerful and wealthy nations engage in this sort of behavior, none hold a candle to the United States. In this episode, we're going to
Hell no.
debunk the myth that the US does not
I ain't
interfere in foreign
surprised.
affairs, and take a brief look at the mountains of evidence that show, contrary to what US leaders would have you believe, this country is the most meddlesome in the world. To give some context for Biden's
Swallowing
speech at the
ice and
beginning of
shit.
the video, he was talking about Russia's alleged attempts to meddle in US elections. While much of the Russia fear-mongering was, and is, an attempt to deflect blame for America's own problems, we need to realize that most strong nations are always messing with their peers and competitors to their own advantage. Espionage or
Of
throwing a wrench in
course.
foreign affairs is not some fringe approach to global geopolitical jockeying. It has, for a very long time, been a fairly common method of one nation trying to get ahead of others. Russia does it, the US does it, France, the UK, you name it. It's immature and ahistorical to throw a fit about other nations meddling when your own nation is doing the same thing. It's especially ridiculous if you're the President of the United States, the nation guilty of the most foreign interventions by far. We'll start with US interference in elections specifically.
Well, as special counsel Robert Mueller continues his probe into Russian meddling into the 2016 election, we take a look back at Washington's record of meddling in elections across the globe. By one count, the United States has interfered in more than 80 foreign elections between 1946 and 2000. And that doesn't count U.S.-backed coups and invasions.
Since the end of World War II, the United States has tried to influence the outcome of elections in Italy, Iran, Japan, Brazil, Costa Rica, Chile, Uruguay, Italy again, El Salvador, Panama, Nicaragua, Ukraine, Russia, Mongolia, El Salvador again, and Palestine, to name just a few. Each of these instances failed to make the kind of news that Russian meddling is making today. I guess it's different when you're on the receiving end. And you don't have to take my word for it. Here's former CIA Director James Woolsey openly admitting our efforts to undermine the democratic process in order to further U.S. interests.
What should the U.S. do to counteract Russian interference?
Oh, probably. But it was for the good of the system in order to avoid the communists from taking over. For example, in Europe, in 47, 48, 49, the
It's on
Greeks and the
communists. It's
Italians.
communist.
We don't do that now,
CIA.
though. We don't mess around other people's elections, Joe.
Only for a very good
Can
cause.
you do that to a Vine video on a former CIA director?
Only for a very good cause in
Okay.
the interests of democracy.
All right, thanks for being here.
You'll notice that he can't even say we're no longer meddling in foreign elections. This should be obvious to anyone keeping up with current events, but it's pretty damning to hear it directly from the organization responsible for many of these crimes. You'll also note that Woolsey made sure to say that we only meddle for very good reasons and in the interest of democracy. Now, it was my understanding that the democratic process meant the people of their respective nations had the right to make their voices heard at the ballot box, free from coercion or interference. If that's the case, then the United States government's definition must be something entirely different. In what world?
What's the point of voting if you just gonna make the person that you want to win anyway? What's the point of voting?
Is it in the interest of democracy to have a foreign intelligence agency undermining elections to influence the result? That's like burning a house down and saying you're doing it to prevent fires. Okay, so wait. If the United States isn't actually defending democracy around the world, if we're actively undermining the democratic process, why are we doing it? What's the real reason? Well, if you take a look, every single foreign intervention by the United States, with very few exceptions, has been in the interest of acquiring resources, expanding our imperial reach and establishing new military footholds, or overthrowing governments that refuse to bend the knee to US superiority, and installing puppet regimes more agreeable to US goals in the region. This may sound uncharitable, but it's objectively true. We have libraries worth of evidence of the imperialist crimes of the United States. I've left some examples in the description. It's not random either. The capitalist powers, especially the US, have very specific targets they try to sabotage. What kind of governments does the US try to undermine? It is always...
Wow, bro, look, did y'all see homie, the yellow dude, the yellow hair? Bro look like a robot.
Those that have implemented or are beginning to implement left-wing economic policies. The United States corporate-controlled government understands that humane, common-sense, worker-centric policies are incredibly appealing to the average person, including Americans. U.S. leadership does not want to run the risk of a successful left-wing economy growing large enough to offer the world an alternative to destructive, genocidal capitalism. But trying to influence the outcome of elections will only get you so far. If you really want to throw a wrench in things, you need to take a more aggressive approach. This is where the US really shines.
Bro, I ain't trying to watch no. Oop.
Weird alert, mysterious stream of logs. I work back to the root on one.
I'm scared.
You've probably seen this infographic floating around online. It's a little outdated at this point, and doesn't even include all the US's interventions, but the fact that the United States, the supposed defender of freedom and democracy, has engaged in at least 56 military interventions in Latin America since 1890 is insane. When casting doubt on an election outcome just isn't enough, the imperial powers have some other tricks up their sleeve. The favorites of the United States are fomenting coups, funding right-wing death squads, and sending in the CIA or paramilitary groups to cause as much chaos and disarray as possible. The list is far too long to cover in depth, but let's take a look at just a couple of the more well-known examples. We'll start with Chile.
Tuesday, September the 11th. Out of an early autumn sky, two
This
jets
real footage.
launched a deadly attack on a potent symbol of democracy and freedom in a nation's capital. The result is fire, suicide, and ultimately the death or disappearance of over 3,000 people. Shockwaves are felt around the world. This is the story of one day in September.
Since the early 1930s, Chile had been a shining example of democracy and political stability in Latin America. All of that came to a screeching halt in September of 1973. Salvador Allende, a physician and socialist politician, had been elected president in September of 1970, making him the first Marxist to hold the office of president in a Latin American liberal democracy. The United States didn't like that. Allende had served his country in various government positions for over 40 years before ascending to the presidency. And as president, his platform included nationalizing key industries, improving and expanding education, and improving the living conditions of the working class. These common-sense policies made him quite popular among the Chilean people. though decidedly less popular with the right-wing parties that controlled other parts of the government, and even less popular with the United States, which had begun actively plotting to overthrow the democratically elected Chilean president and install a puppet dictator. These
A
plans came to
puppet
fruition on
dictator.
September 11th, 1973. The Chilean military, supported and advised by the CIA, laid siege to the presidential palace. Allende vowed he would not leave, and instead broadcast what would become his final speech to his fellow Chileans, an inspiring call to never give up and look towards a brighter future free from oppression.
From inside the palace, Allende refused to leave, true to his promise not to surrender
If this is real, then why you sitting around recording shit when there's literally death and destruction going on? I'm confused.
the government.
Is this video more important? Like, if anything, okay, you want to get a video of it. Hopefully, you make it out and you can remember it. But do a 5-second video, 10-second max. Why you over there for 30 seconds, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, thinking nothing gonna happen to you?
For which the ordinary people of Chile had voted. He broadcast this last message, then he shot himself.
Huh?
For which the ordinary people of Chile had voted. He broadcast this last message, then he shot himself.
Trabajadores de mi patria, tengo fe en Chile y su destino. Sigan ustedes sabiendo que mucho más temprano que tarde, de nuevo, abrirán las grandes alamedas por donde pase el hombre libre para construir una sociedad mejor. ¡Viva Chile! ¡Viva el pueblo! ¡Vivan los trabajadores!
Allende took his own life rather than let the US-backed coup plotters capture him. After the military seized power, General Augusto
Man, you better go out like, you know what I'm saying? You better go out like him. What you mean? You gonna kill yourself? As soon as y'all bust in this room, I'm shooting. Y'all gonna have to kill me or have to catch me.
Pinochet established a military dictatorship, which would remain in place until 1990, crippling the Chilean economy and destroying all the progress made by Allende's socialist initiatives. You've probably seen right-wingers make references to pushing their political opponents out of helicopters. They're referring to Chile under Pinochet. It was common during that bloody period for the military to kidnap dissidents, take them up in helicopters, and throw them out, typically over the water, and usually with their stomachs cut open, so that their bodies would sink. At Pinochet's direct
Wow, that's just crazy.
Thousands of Chileans were tortured, executed, or disappeared. All of this was the result of the United States and their genocidal commitment to ensuring no economic system could ever offer an alternative to capitalism.
Bro, that's crazy, bro. And I ain't surprised, though. I'm not surprised, but that's crazy.
Let's look.
That's just weird, though. Like, you gonna cut their stomach open so they sink to the bottom. And their stomach don't make them float. Y'all going to hell.
At another example, Nicaragua. After the revolution, during which the socialist Sandinistas overthrew the Somoza dictatorship in 1979, the United States once again set its sights on Latin America. The US had originally intended to work out some kind of agreement with Nicaragua, but when the country chose to side with the global socialist movement and work with Cuba and the Soviet Union instead, the US quickly changed its approach. As with Chile, US leadership was completely unwilling to allow a budding left-wing economy to grow to eventually challenge the myth of capitalist superiority. They feared a socialist movement, a genuinely democratic movement, unlike the facade of democracy we have in the US, would inspire revolutions throughout Latin America. In December of 1981, Reagan authorized covert operations in Nicaragua. These operations would eventually include funding, arming, and training what were called the Contras, groups dedicated to overthrowing the new government. Among the equipment provided by the CIA were instruments of torture and assassination, one of the more egregious actions that earned the United States a slap on the wrist for violation of international law was the CIA's production and distribution of a manual titled Psychological Operations in Guerrilla Warfare. This guidebook, which the CIA distributed to their loyal right-wing death squads, encouraged the assassination of certain targets, including non-military personnel like judges, police officers, and government officials. It also encouraged the inciting of riots and shootings which would result in the death of selected members of the Contras themselves, with the aim of turning them into martyrs and thereby building support for the Contra cause. The United States would continue to sow chaos in Nicaragua for years. Contra cause actions that earned the United States a group of American coup plotters just last year. And as we speak, we're witnessing a surge of right-wing opposition to the democratic election of socialist candidate Pedro Castillo in Peru. It is absolutely guaranteed those factions are working with U.S. intelligence agencies to undermine the democratic process and prevent socialism from gaining any ground. Latin America represents the front lines in the fight to throw off the yoke of capitalism and build a brighter, freer future, without the oppression of the United States or the other imperialist powers. It is essential that Western socialists support these struggles for self-determination. But Latin America isn't the only target. We've also seen decades of coups and attempted nation building by the US in the Middle East and in Asia. There's a reason the United States is running 24/7 propaganda operations and has over 400 military bases surrounding China, a
400?
country that routinely supports growing socialist movements in other countries. So, when US officials claim that we don't meddle in foreign elections, that we do what we do for the sake of defending democracy and freedom, understand that they're lying to you. And they know it. The United States does not defend democracy abroad. We don't even have real democracy at home. American leadership has lied about socialism for over a century. And if you don't believe me, read the CIA's own words on Stalin, saying
Why
that
her
the Western
armpit not
conception of
clean though?
communism is wrong, and that the Soviet Union did indeed have collective leadership, as opposed to the strongman dictator myth that American leadership peddles to this day. All of this information is out in the open. You can find it just by searching a few keywords online. The fact that the President of the United States can address the American people and brazenly claim that this country does not meddle in foreign affairs should be insulting to you. Every US administration is counting on the fact that the American citizens will never take the time to educate themselves and deconstruct the imperialist propaganda. Prove them wrong. Read non-Western sources. Talk to people from different countries. Learn actual history. The internet makes all of this easier than it's ever been. Moving the needle away from genocidal imperialism and capitalist domination and towards egalitarian socialism and true democracy will be a challenge. It will require average people going out of their way to correct false narratives, to educate themselves and those in their circle. But if we want to ensure a livable future, if we want our children and grandchildren to actually experience freedom and democracy, we have to start today.
Yeah, we do. We do gotta start today. That's a long way down the road, though. I ain't gonna cut. I'm gonna catch you on the next one. If y'all fuck with that, let me know in the comments. And let me know what y'all want me to do next.